bit of an experiment, the first experiment of kind of ongoing conversation between ourselves and between you, and then hopefully between a kind of growing group of other people too. And so this is sort of part discussion here, part podcast, part webinar, part sort of conversation. Well, as you said, it's a good conversation, isn't it? That's what we decided it was called. And so before we get there, I mean, so why don't you guys introduce yourselves, you two Dutch friends who I'm looking at here, do a little bit of a just intro who you are, and then we can get into our conversation.
Yeah. Niels, do you want to start this time?
Yes. So hi to all. We are, I'm Niels, and yeah, you can probably see Jaap. This is Jaap. Two guys from the Netherlands. We know each other since 2015. We started the business together. We founded but we did a lot of projects and founded some businesses for the social good, social impact. And I think 2 years ago, we were at the turning point, like, are we going to grow as a business, or are we going to focus and find a project where we can spend the rest of our lives on? We chose the latter, and now we're starting a regenerative farm in the Netherlands. That's the short story.
Great. Well, we'll come to that. We'll come back to your regenerative farm shortly. Yeah. And so this conversation that we're having, I'll just explain a little bit of the kind of backstory to that for everyone who's interested. I see Lawrence is here. Actually, Lawrence inadvertently is the reason that this conversation is happening. So last year, I was involved with a program that Lawrence's community organizes called Vision 2020. And on that program, which is a great program, highly recommend it to you all. On that, I met Elspeth, who I don't think is with us today. And Elspeth connected me to Jaap and Niels, because I had a kind of an interest in better understanding this kind of regenerative movement. Like many people, kind of really drawn to the ideas, but actually don't really know much about it. Just something in it kind of feels right. And I was kind of interested in food because obviously I eat a lot of food and my children eat food, and food seems to be a kind of important part of what we're doing. And I guess inspired a little bit by some of the kind of media events of the time, things like The Biggest Little Farm and Kiss the Ground documentary, which was sort of increasingly kind of interested in kind of understanding this kind of movement and understanding how I might sort of contribute to it. And Elspeth had introduced me to you guys because you guys are actually doing something rather than me, who's just sort of talking about things and having these sorts of conversations. And we kind of, over the course of last year, we sort of spoke quite a bit. We attempted to hold some roundtables in January, didn't we, where we were going to invite people, because I think the idea that we had then is that the regenerative movement might benefit from a sort of consistent story or a coherent story consistently told. And so we thought it would be very useful to hold some roundtables where we invited all different people from the regenerative movement to talk about this. And I think that idea was good, except nobody came. So we decided we needed to change tack a little bit. And we thought, well, the best thing to do, given we were spending once a week having a good conversation, we thought, well, let's just continue our good conversation and open it up to the world and see if other people join. And so that's essentially what we are doing here today, a kind of opportunity for us all, really, to talk about the regenerative movement, an opportunity for us to learn about it, hopefully an opportunity for you guys to learn about it too. And in that we can also kind of follow the journey a little bit of Jaap and Niels, who, like I said, are actually are kind of pioneering. They are in the ground, literally in the ground. So yeah, that sort of explains a little bit about what we're doing and why we're doing it, because it kind of feels like a sort of an opportune time. When we look around, I know you guys, there seem to be kind of more and more and more kind of events and talks and sort of businesses and organizations kind of spring up around the kind of regenerative idea. And I know, Jaap, you were talking about this as a sort of good idea because you were part of a seminar or something a few weeks ago. Maybe sort of explain a little bit about that.
Yeah, well, a few weeks ago, there was an event in the Netherlands, the Bio Next Week, and there was also one of the seminars was a webinar about regeneration. And there were over 100 people listening to that webinar. And then I thought, okay, so also in the Netherlands, this regenerative movement, not only of farmers, but also of citizens and consumers, is getting bigger and bigger and bigger. Well, and the reason to have this conversation with you, Ben, is and hopefully with more of you, is because what you see is that a lot of stories about regeneration is about farming. It's about the soil, but we are also curious if it's a bigger movement. If it's also about regenerative business. Well, the society, and what do we need to move to transform to a regenerative society? Because and of course farmers are a big part of this society, but I think the movement is bigger. And and another insight we had in the last 2 years in our journey is that a lot of the stories are about farming and are going around in the farmers movement. But how are we going to connect the citizens, the people, with this movement? And how are we going to explain or tell the story about regeneration, not technical, but in inspiring and with hope? So that was a little bit our investigation at the end of last year, to investigate if other people that are part of this movement feel the same. That we need.
So yes, I think the thing we were talking about there was the kind of how you translate the movement to as kind of wide a group of people as possible. Essentially, that one of the things you're talking about there.
Yeah, because well, very specific. It is in the Netherlands. You have the organic movement, and the prices of organic food are higher than the food you buy in the supermarket, but they are better for you as a person. And well, with regenerative farming, there is not such a thing as certification, not yet. And it's also a question, I think, in the movement if we need certification, because it's also like how do you call it in Dutch, in English? It's full of rules and
labor fatigue.
Yeah. So thank you, Koen. But you have to explain in other words or another story that the food you are producing with the principles you use is also good or maybe better than organic or that kind of thing.
So I guess maybe it'd be a good kind of opportunity just to kind of, I'm kind of really interested in your journey, the idea that you've kind of been working in business, like you said, been involved with, setting up businesses, working with entrepreneurs very much in that space. I think kind of service design and that, sort of lots of services in that kind of area. And, as you sort of touched on, Niels, this sort of question that you ask yourselves, well, what are we going to do? Are we going to continue doing this, or are we going to sort of work on the system? And this decision that you thought the thing that you should do is you should set up a farm. And I guess the kind of point I just want to kind of make clear to everybody on the call and everybody who kind of listens after, because there's hundreds of thousands of people who are obviously listening to this afterwards, obviously. Just a kind of reminder that actually, so you guys are not farmers. I think if we look down, you're probably not wearing kind of rubber Wellington boots as we talk.
No, I left them.
You left them on the farm.
Yeah.
So this kind of, so kind of coming into this with kind of very kind of untainted eyes. And I'm kind of curious to understand what your sort of vision of this farm of the future is, because I know that's the thing that you are working towards. So it'd be good just to kind of share a little bit about what you see, what that vision is and what you're trying to do.
Yeah, so I think the reason that we are in an office now, wearing just office shoes, it's also one of the reasons we are starting a farm at the moment. So when you're at the crossroad and have to make a choice, we also thought about, well, we're in the car a lot, we're in the train a lot, we're a lot of the time in boardroom and in offices, and we want to be more outside. And when we started Mint, it's our company at the moment, and we were doing social impact. First we did just normal commercial work as consultants, and the free time and money we had, we invested in social projects. And then we thought, well, that's a crazy idea. So we have to work and then we earn money, and then we can buy time so we can invest that in doing social work. But social work should be the core of our business. So that's what we try to do with Mint, and I think we succeeded in that. And now it's actually, we did the same. So we want to be more outside. We want to be close to nature, learn from nature. But why do we have to work really hard in order to buy free time to do just that? Why can we just why aren't we integrated it in our businesses? And then, okay, that came up. We need to move outside. We started the prototype. So it's called a small market garden. We started, and then I think I don't know how exactly it came. We decided to become farmers, but it has also something to do with the fact that everything we do, we first do ourselves. So there was never anybody in our businesses that did work that we hadn't done before. So just to get a feeling with the work. So I think that was also the reason. So, okay, if you want to be part of building a regenerative society, because that's ultimately the ultimate goal we're trying to achieve, then it made total sense just to start a farm. And yeah, we are not farmers. We have no experience whatsoever. We're not from a farmer family, which also makes it very hard in the Netherlands to start a farm, because we don't have land, we don't own a farm, our parents don't own a farm. It's nearly impossible to get the finance together to start. But we are doing that because we also think that a lot more people in the Netherlands should do this. And since we put it out there, I think 2 years ago, we put it on LinkedIn that we were looking for land. We got a lot of reactions, and also from a lot of people who said, "Oh wow, I always wanted to do this," or "I would really love to do this, what you guys are doing, but I can't." And so you basically say, "I can't provide for my own food."
Mm.
So that's.
And when people say, "I can't," or "you can't," then we are trying harder. So, but maybe a little bit background. We are community builders and marketeers. That's what we are, and we developed some businesses in the past. What I see now, 2 years working on this idea and on this plan, is that community building and marketing. That's the whole. There was a farmer in the Netherlands. We talked about our plans, and he said, "Okay, trust yourself that you can grow a carrot or vegetables, because you put in the seed in the ground, and if you nurture it, it will grow. And maybe the quality is in the first year not the quality you are expecting to sell, but if you learn to watch, to observe nature, next year is going better and better and better." But what the sector, what other farmers are missing is building community. It's telling the good stories. It's a little bit entrepreneurship. So that's what he welcomed, and he said, "You can learn from me about how to grow food, and I want to learn from you about how to build different businesses, etc., and tell the story." And that's, I think, that's what we want to bring also the other farmers, the traditional farmers, the regenerative farmers, organic farmers. We want to bring this whole movement or job group, or how we do the things. And that's what we have now, a community of farmers, from animal farmers to vegetable farmers who wants to help us build this farm in the Netherlands. And there is a question from Matt. Maybe we can try to answer it, because the question is, how are you engaging the traditional farmers?
It's a bit mixed.
Yeah, it's mixed. So it's 50-50. So there are farmers who are saying what you want to try to build, it's impossible. You can't earn money with it. You can't grow it or scale it. And there are also traditional farmers who said, "Wow, this is great, and maybe we can learn from it."
I'm curious, Matt. What's the thought behind the question?
I suppose because I'm kind of thinking about this regenerative space myself. It's more one of the issues I'm coming up against. If you're talking about traditional service-based business, which is really kind of my background in the design sector, not dissimilar to Ben, is I just get lots of throwaway comments from what I call traditional business owners and founders, particularly in the UK, obviously, because that's my area. Is yeah, that sounds great. You're just a bunch of fucking hippies. Do you understand what I mean? And it's that, how do you kind of get beyond that barrier? So that's really kind of where I'm trying to get to, is how do you break down those barriers and
bring them to some very non-hippie regenerative farmers is usually what I try to do.
Yeah, which it's not. It's regenerative is it's not a hippie ideal. It's it's let's say natural logic, isn't it?
Yeah. We were, I think, a little over a year ago, we were at a farmer in the Netherlands. He's the biggest worm farmer in the Netherlands, actually. He exports a lot of worms to the States for fishing. But he started at a traditional farm. He's actually, when Jaap was really small, he worked at that farm. We had a nice conversation, but he thought that our day was completely crazy. And he had a student there, and the student came and sit at the table, and he completely destroyed us. Where we were, so that we were totally crazy. We were hit by the I'm not sure I call it in English.
Oh, that's the Anglo-Dutch.
But
hit by the windmill.
Yeah.
Okay.
And that was at the beginning of our journey, actually. So it was a bit disappointing. But now we are a part of many groups and discussions about the future of farming, or the future as society as a whole. And that there are a lot of people that want things to be different and things to change. But there are also a lot of people they don't know how. But the fact that they want to, there's a drive somewhere that's an enormous help.
Well, and to add something to that story about the old farmer where I worked when I was young, his student called me a half year later after that conversation to ask more about organic farming and where he has to, who he has to call to know more, or how he can find a market for it. So I think it's also, especially when you are new in the business, it's not they versus us, or it's not, we have to, I believe that most of the farmers are in the farming business because of the beauty of the job, and that there is a big system that has pushed them to do some things that is not good for the soil and for our planet. And if you believe that, then you can have a very good conversation with traditional farmers. So that's also, and especially when you are new in the business, you don't have to shout out a lot that people are doing it not right.
I think one of the things that I've always found as well is that, like, kind of human nature, we're basically kind of, all sort of wandering around, basically sort of scared little animals. And so no is often our first response. Like, if somebody comes with you think, we just say no, because actually all we're doing, it just buys us some time to work out actually what we think about something. And so kind of everybody's, really common first response, no, that won't work. No. Just because actually what we're really trying to do is just buy a little bit of time just to kind of work out what is this kind of person sort of talking about. And so that thing is, it's just the kind of beginning of a dialogue. I was kind of curious, Koen, you mentioned you mentioned something about taking people where you met people who were kind of resistant, taking them to examples of people who weren't the hippie.
Obviously pre-COVID, but yeah.
Yeah, right. Okay, yeah. In the olden days.
No, I think it really depends. I mean, I've had discussions with hardcore bankers, with renewable energy developers that are moving into regen ag, and definitely take a very strong margin focus and see, let's say, what they saw 15 years ago in wind farm developments or solar developments, and are definitely in it for the impact, but definitely see the huge financial and cost reductions, honestly, and the premiums that are there for certain products and certain niches. So very financially driven discussions, and that really clicks for some people. And you send the white paper of Paul McMahon over about the investment case for ecological farming, then he didn't call it regen, but basically he talks in investment language why this makes so much sense. But for other people, it makes much more sense to bring them to a very functional market garden where somebody on an acre or an hectare is basically getting a city income, but have also the lifestyle that for some people might be very interesting. So it really, really depends on your audience. It's really difficult to predict what clicks, but bringing somebody to, let's say, a functioning farm that applies regen approaches and practices, and with somebody like a farmer that can teach or that can explain and can show, usually does the magic. And then people go down the rabbit hole of reading the books and going to the movies and et cetera. But I think visiting and touching and feeling, depending on the size you can get your hands on, and depending on the audience, like sometimes it makes sense to visit a gigantic potato farmer somewhere or a very small mixed farm in northern Italy. I mean, it really depends on the audience. But the examples are there, and there are people that are in it for the money are doing very, very well, and maybe discovering the impact side later on. And people that are in it for the impact can do very well as well, but maybe made some other choices in terms of how to spend their time or pushing for financial returns, etc. But just the myth of it's impossible to make money with agriculture is already very difficult to, let's say, how do you say, basically to turn that around. It's impossible to convince somebody until a farmer saw it. I remember a story of Jonathan Lundgren, who wrote one of the few papers on profitability and regen ag, which showed very interesting results, to say the least. And they had a deep research with a few almond farmers in California. And you could see the difference, like left and right. Like the left farm was fully cover crop, like it was a place you wanted to be under the almond. And the other one was basically desert and a few sad trees that kept being alive with drip irrigation and a lot of chemicals. And yet the farmer on the right couldn't believe that the other one was couldn't believe until they sat down, had a coffee and looked at the numbers, even though they could see across the fence that it looked just way, way better. And now, of course, the other one is in transition as well, because as soon as you see the numbers, if that was the thing that he needed to click, maybe he already did a lot of internal work before. But I found it impossible to predict, but exposing people to interesting examples, usually at some point it clicks somewhere and people go down the rabbit hole. And then it's not that you can go back after or something. As soon as you start digging, it just never ends.
Right. Yeah, that's really helpful. Now, I'm conscious of time because we said we were going to try and keep these to half an hour. And I think that would be a sort of good thing to do. Kind of really appreciate everybody's kind of input. I think the question we asked a little bit coming into this, excuse me, was whether these kind of regenerative ideas are just for farming. And of course, like I know we kind of, Matt, as you're talking about with your example, and everybody's kind of referencing to and alluding to, clearly it goes kind of much broader. And I think that's kind of where we're in part we're interested in how you sort of take these ideas and help them grow, to excuse the pun, in kind of other settings. And Niels, you mentioned as well that the ultimate goal is how to build a kind of regenerative society. And I think that that's kind of what we're interested in, how we're interested in kind of taking the conversation. But also, we really appreciate you having turned up, the first people to join the first conversation. We really, really appreciate that. And it would be good to keep the conversation going sort of over email over the coming days, so that, we can get the next conversation. Essentially, I think we'll say it would be great to get your input on what the next conversation might most usefully be on, because I think clearly this is a whole big area. And so where we kind of go next, I think is kind of important, and it would be good to get your feedback on that. So I think just a kind of thank you from me for coming today. Anything from you guys, Jaap and Niels?
Also thank you, of course, for dropping in. And I'm looking forward to the next weeks and to see this conversation grow. Because what we didn't say about the farm is that we are building this farm for production, but the other half of the time and we will invest in getting businesses and organizations more regenerative minded. So it's going to be a place where not only future farmers or traditional farmers can learn how you can farm a regenerative way, but also businesses and organizations can learn from nature and nature principles to put it in their business model. So that's our vision in how we want to create this regenerative society, or not created by us alone, but be part of this creation. And that's also the idea of these conversations, to get this broader idea about how we can actually do this, and with who we have to connect, etc., etc. So very, very happy for you that you drop in. And Niels, last words from you.
Yeah, no, I think this is a really really nice.
Make it a good one.
Because we were a little bit tired of only Ben in the conversation. And Ben, thank you for pointing out that when people say no, that actually means that they need to think about it. Now I understand my toddler. He's 2 years and he's in his no phase. Now I know why.
Just needs time to think about it. Your answer could be, just take your time. You get even more frustrated. No.
No, but I think this is a really nice way of having the conversation. We'll see you next week, I hope. And are there any last words from our guests?
Yeah.
No, it's great. Definitely going to be back. Think more deeply about it. It's one of those ones, I don't know if you guys have read Green Swans by John Elkington. It's a book about sort of the coming boom in regenerative capitalism.
They're going to do an observatory, right? Following these things.
To read or discuss.
Sorry, what were you saying?
I think they're going to do an observatory to follow the green swans they discovered, or to follow these the breakthroughs.
Right. Okay.
It will be more than a book. I think it will be an ongoing project, which is very interesting.
Yeah. Nice. So I'll be happy to be back.
Great. Well, thank you very much. And thank you to Keith. I can see you hiding behind your video list, but I know you're there and appreciate you being there.
I am, Ben. There he is. Thank you.
Very good. So now we've got some Ireland in the room. We've got some Holland in the room. We've got some near Bristol in the room. I know where Matt is. I don't know where you are, Koen.
I'm in southern Italy, actually.
Oh, well, there we go. See, look. It's a whole European adventure.
No diversity in the room, though, but that we need to work on.
It's also nice.
That is true.
For later, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Right. Thank you very much, everyone. Appreciate your time. Appreciate the conversation. And same time next week, as they say on the news.
Bye.
Okay. You.
Bye.
Bye. Well, that went well.
We had a conversation.
Yeah.
And it was a good one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I paused the
Oh, no, I can finally speak freely.